Welcome back. As we continue our coverage of today's Democratic and Republican primaries in the race to be the next governor of New Jersey. Now, on the Democratic side, all eyes on former Ambassador Phil Murphy. The polls show him entering the primary with a commanding lead over the Democratic field, a lead he's frankly held since the very beginning of the race. While on the Republican side of things, Lieutenant Governor Kim Guadagno is also hoping to become a wire-to-wire winner. But many will be watching to see if Republican primary voters penalize Guadagno for just how unpopular her boss, Governor Chris Christie, is among Garden State voters. Now, those numbers coming from the Hughes Center for Public Policy at Stockton University in New Jersey. And for more, let's turn to Sharon Schulman. Sharon is the executive director of the center. Well, we're a few hours away here, and it would be a major surprise, if we break down the numbers here, that, like I said, on the Democratic side, whether it be Murphy, and on the Republican side, Guadagno, they're not the eventual winners. Why do you think there's such a spread, given one is basically new to New Jersey this year on the Democrats, and on the Republican side, she was the lieutenant governor for an extremely unpopular governor?
So the fact that she has a big a lead right now, she has name recognition. It's as simple as that. And on the Democratic side, the candidate has been able to spend a significant amount of money to get his name out there, and he's worked hard for a long time campaigning at all ends of the state. So in a state where it's hard to get your message out right now, where there's not a lot of interest in what's going on, those numbers make a difference.
You know what I found interesting, Sharon, also from your polls, was what the big drivers were. Property taxes, not surprisingly important to New Jersey voters, but also certainly pension funding and education. I'm curious, do voters, do you think down deep, I know you didn't ask this question, but do they believe it will change one way or the other depending on who the next governor is, given how bad the math in the Garden State really facing the next governor will be?
I don't know what they believe, I know what they feel. And there's no question that people are concerned about that. If you think about the amount of voters and their families that are affected by education and affected by pensions in this state, it's dramatic. Almost everybody has somebody who's been affected by the pension plan.
You know, right track, wrong track, you guys asked that as well, and 3/4 believed they were heading the wrong direction. I'm curious, historically, is that the norm going into an election year for governor, or is this a particularly bleak picture for the electorate?
This is a little bit more for the electorate. Remember, we're an off-cycle election based on the nation. We have our elections every 4 years, and it's not the presidential year, so it's just us in Virginia right now. So the people, look, there's a lot of people who are completely just undecided on these different things, and a part of that is the combination of voter apathy and a voter burnout from a long, long presidential election.
Also, what surprised me, at least, maybe it shouldn't, of how many people would have been willing to vote for somebody not Republican or Democrat, that would have been willing to go the independent route. And as you mentioned, also such a big chunk that still sit undecided right now. It seems that folks in New Jersey have had it in a very broad-based statement.
New Jersey hasn't recovered as well as other states have. So yes, they're tired. They've had a governor for a long time now that's had a tumultuous 8 years. He's been involved in national politics. I think we're looking for stability. I think we're looking for some answers, and I think we want to feel like we're moving forward.
Well, we will find out in just a few hours. Sharon Schulman, thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
You're welcome.
And for analysis of today's New Jersey primaries and what it might mean as we look towards November, we turn to Daryl Isherwood. Daryl, Senior VP for Mercury Public Relations. Before that, he spent more than a dozen years covering New Jersey politics for the Star-Ledger, Politicker, NJ, and more. Daryl, always good to talk to you.
Hey, Richard, how you doing? Appreciate you having me.
I'm doing pretty good. Let me guess. If you were a betting man today, you'd take the favorites going away, or do you think somebody from the field might surprise?
I'd say favorites going away. I don't really see any surprises tonight come the ballot closing. I think we're looking at Phil Murphy on the Democratic side challenging Kim Guadagno on the Republican side come November.
Let's start with the Democrats, because what I was a little surprised was it's not like the field doesn't have some folks who know their way around Trenton, but between the power brokers and a lot of the electeds, they got behind Murphy early and often. Do you put that because, He's got a ton of money, but why did the machine get behind him so early?
Yeah, I think there's a few factors that came into play. One of them is exactly that. Parties love a self-funder when they don't have to go out and raise a ton of money for a guy, and he's got the resources to basically, outspend anybody who challenges him. That's a huge draw for the parties. The other thing is, Murphy surrounded himself with just an outstanding campaign staff. He had a lot of Democratic Party veterans from the Frank Lautenberg shop and others. And he brought that to bear early before anybody else realized there was a race. For a while, we were all talking about Steve Sweeney versus Steve Fulop. And it was sort of the parlor game to see which of those two was the front runner in this race. And suddenly Phil Murphy kind of comes out of nowhere. And before anybody really has time to react, he's got as you said, he's got the power brokers from both North and South lining up behind him. And it was over before it even began. He moved in and secured the endorsements and the party lines in the counties that he needed it. And he was sort of anointed the candidate and almost anointed the next governor before some people were even in the race.
And it's amazing. I had both Mistyuski and Lesniak here. And recently they've been running ads where they basically says you got Corzine 2.0 with Murphy. He's a Goldman Sachs guy and everything else. But they didn't run these ads here till almost June, it seemed, where people either made up their mind or with all these undecideds, they're not even motivated to go to the polls as it is tomorrow. It is interesting. I mean, I know you said a lot of people thought Sweeney was going to get in this thing, and when he didn't, there was a void. But Murphy, for a guy who hasn't run before, sure knows how to play the game. He was an ambassador, and just in person at least, he seems like he checks off a lot of the boxes for a candidate.
Yeah, he really does. And what's been interesting, you mentioned the ads that have been run. I mean, obviously Murphy's been out there for months with ads and had a lot of money to spend doing it. The thing I have found interesting throughout this race, you and I talked about this once before. You've got Lesniak and Wisniewski, who are two of the sort of the consummate insiders in Trenton. And throughout this race, they have battled to see which one could assume this outsider mantle. They've sort of all been running to see who's the outsider in Trenton, which I find sort of comical considering that both of them have made their livings in Trenton for quite a long time.
On the Republican side, the question is, who's going to be tagged more by being Christie? And I guess, or Christie Light. To that end, the governor did no favors to his lieutenant governor throughout this campaign. Maybe it's a little inside baseball, but you and I both know there was a half a dozen opportunities. He could have let her have the limelight, and he bogarted the moment, Daryl, every single time. Hasn't helped her raise money, and obviously she's got to carry all the bad baggage since Bridgegate just by being associated with the governor's office. Are you a little surprised after 8 years there's no, equity that she's built up with the governor where he'll at least let her have her moment?
Yeah, a little surprised. Now, on the other side of that coin, I'm not sure she really wanted it, or needed it. I think she has run throughout this campaign to sort of distance herself from the governor for all the reasons you said. He's got quite a bit of baggage coming in. But yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised that he wasn't a little warmer toward her, considering that she had sort of stayed in his shadow for the last 7.5 years. I did read this morning that he voted for her, though, which I find interesting. He went to vote and reporters tracked him down, and he said he did vote for her, said she is the best person to challenge Murphy or challenge the Democrats to retain the governorship.
And the funny part is whoever wins and then whoever wins in November, they've got some awful math to contend with, from the pension obligations to the deficits the state's running to headache after headache. Do you think we get some honest accounting during the general campaign? Or do you think somebody says, just get me to November, let me win, and then, I'll dispense the tough love, whether it's a Florio tax or whatever else they got to do? Or do you think we hear it after this evening, between now and November, getting voters ready about what's coming down the pike?
I think we'll probably hear some of it. It's an age-old campaign tactic. It's like get me to the finish line, and we'll worry about the details when we get there. But given that we're likely to see Kim Guadagno as a candidate, I think Democrats will do their best to tie her to every Christie foible, whether it's, the budget, the pension, whatever they can to tie her to any problem the state faces. I think they'll do it. So we may actually see some actual accounting. But by that same token, nobody wants to run a campaign on bad news, and I think that everybody's going to make promises that they're the only one who can fix it. But some of these problems are absolutely intractable.
To put it mildly. Darrell, as always, it's great talking to you. Thanks, man. And as you heard from Mr. Isherwood, bet the scratch tonight. Thanks, Darrell.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it.
And again, tonight, viewers in the Garden State can follow all the action of tonight's primaries on FiOS 1 News, New Jersey. Continuing coverage all evening as we wrap up the primaries right here on RFL. We'll do the coverage tomorrow as to the fallout on this program. Coming up next on RFL, the countdown to Comey. What will Comey say and not, and how will the White House respond, and how worried should the president be here about what his former FBI director has got to say under oath tomorrow on Thursday?